Some goodbyes feel cruel until you realize they were answering a prayer. You forgot you prayed, responding to a cry for growth. You whispered in moments of exhaustion and longing. You didn't imagine the pattern, and you didn't fail at loving well. What you experienced was not random loss, but a precise movement guided by a wisdom far steadier than emotion and far kinder than it first appeared. When people you loved walked away, it felt personal, yet heaven was doing something purposeful, something careful, something aligned with where your life is being led. You may have asked why connection after connection seemed to end just as you became comfortable, just as trust formed, just as hope settled in. The ache felt like rejection, but it was often protection wrapped in sorrow. God has never been careless with your heart, even when the outcome felt harsh. There are seasons when closeness would have kept you small, when familiarity would have softened the urgency to grow, and when staying together would have delayed the clarity you needed. What you called loss heaven recognized as direction, because God is still doing a new thing, even when it unfolds through endings rather than beginnings. Isaiah 43, verse 19. There is a quiet truth many people avoid because it challenges how love is usually defined. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to remain. Some arrive to awaken courage, some to expose dependency, some to reveal patterns that need healing, and then they exit once that work is complete. Love does not fail when people leave. Love sometimes fulfills its purpose and releases both hearts without resentment or blame. That kind of release is not weakness. It is maturity forming beneath the surface, refined through pressure rather than comfort. You are reminded that refinement is not punishment, but preparation, because God tests and purifies what he intends to strengthen. Psalm 66, verse 10. When separation happens repeatedly, it often reveals where identity had slowly attached itself to relationships instead of remaining anchored in God. That realization can be painful, but it is also liberating. You were never meant to draw your sense of worth, direction, or security primarily from people, no matter how dear they were. God loves you too deeply to allow your future to be built on foundations that cannot carry its weight. Jesus spoke plainly about this refining process, saying, "Every branch in me that bears fruit, he prunes that it may bear more fruit." John 15, verse 2. Pruning hurts not because something is wrong, but because something living is being prepared to grow stronger. What felt like abandonment was often redirection disguised as heartbreak. God removes what the heart clings to when that attachment quietly interferes with spiritual growth, discernment, or obedience. The empty space left behind is not proof that something valuable was stolen from you. It is evidence that transformation has already begun. That ache signals movement, not stagnation. It tells you that something within is shifting, stretching, and becoming capable of holding what lasts. What often feels like disruption is actually design unfolding with care, because God doesn't scatter your life. He edits it with intention, trimming what no longer fits the direction ahead so that what remains can stand. When people leave and circumstances shift, the instinct is to interpret the change as loss or rejection. Yet heaven sees something more exact taking place. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. Precision can feel severe when attachment forms before understanding matures, and the heart reacts faster than wisdom has time to interpret what God is protecting. The ache intensifies because connection usually develops before clarity does. You invested trust, shared history, and allowed familiarity to shape your emotional world, and then distance interrupted what felt stable. That interruption does not mean the relationship was fake or meaningless. It means it could not withstand the future weight attached to your calling. God creates distance to preserve destiny, not to wound the heart. Agreement must exist not only in affection, but in direction, because can two walk together, except they be agreed? Amos 3, verse 3. When paths begin to diverge, unity becomes strain, not strength. Often divine separation removes illusion before it removes people. You start seeing what you once overlooked, noticing compromises that felt harmless at the time, yet quietly limited growth. God simplifies your spiritual environment so clarity can surface without competing voices pulling your attention in opposite directions. What leaves frequently cannot survive the altitude you are being called to reach, and that realization comes with grief, because elevation always demands adjustment. The pain is not proof of damage, it is evidence that purpose is shifting. There are seasons when God extracts relationships not because they were evil, but because they were insufficient for what is next. The heart resists this truth because comfort prefers familiarity over formation. Still, God values preparation more than preservation. He allows distance to teach discernment, humility, and dependence that comfort could never cultivate. This is why the process feels exposing. The blueprint has not yet been revealed, so precision feels personal. Yet God's intent remains loving even when the method feels severe. Time and reflection often reveal that this distancing also unmasks identity. You begin to see where belonging was drawn more from people than from God, and that discovery stings because it touches vulnerability. Still, correction wrapped in love produces strength. God leads his people through seasons of testing, not to humiliate them, but to instruct them. He reminds you of the journey, so you understand what sustained you and what distracted you, because thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee to humble thee, and to prove thee to know what was in thine heart. Deuteronomy 8 verse 2. This process is not rushed. Precision takes time because God is not merely rearranging circumstances. He is shaping capacity. Separation clears space for wisdom, stabilizes discernment, and trains you to move with intention rather than impulse. It simplifies your world so obedience becomes clearer and less divided. Even when the pain sharpens, it signals that refinement is underway, not that you are being undone. Growth that lasts rarely comes without discomfort. Discipline feels heavy in the moment because it confronts attachment, but its purpose is restoration, not restriction. God does not remove joy. He refines it so it can endure. The discomfort you feel today is not the final word. Now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Hebrews 12 verse 11. What is being shaped in you now will support what is being entrusted to you later. Beloved, momentum carries you into a deeper realization once the dust of separation settles, because clarity often arrives quietly after emotion has exhausted its argument. Some people enter your life not to remain, but to awaken something that had been dormant, and that truth reframes endings that once felt like personal failure. You begin to see that presence and permanence are not the same thing. A relationship can be genuine, meaningful, and even loving while still being temporary by design. That understanding does not diminish what was shared, it redeems it. Every soul that crosses your path carries an assignment whether they recognize it or not. Some arrive to mirror unresolved places within you, bringing buried wounds to the surface so healing can finally begin. Others highlight strengths you underestimated or courage you did not know you possessed. When the work is complete, the assignment shifts. This is not cruelty, it is order. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1. God operates with timing that honors growth, not attachment, and seasons conclude when lessons are complete, not when emotions feel ready. The tension you feel when a season ends usually comes from holding on beyond its purpose. Love resists endings because it remembers connection, yet wisdom learns to recognize completion. Sincere affection does not require lifelong proximity to be valid. You can honor what was real without forcing it to continue. When you cling to what has already taught you what it came to teach, suffering multiplies unnecessarily. God never asks you to carry yesterday into tomorrow when it would restrict forward movement. Perspective shifts when you realize that God does not recycle relationships once their purpose has been fulfilled. He is always moving forward, never looping you back into old patterns for comfort. Light progresses, gradually revealing the next step, without overwhelming the path ahead, just as the path of the just is, as the shining light that shineth more and more unto the perfect day. Proverbs 4 verse 18. Growth is incremental, and each stage builds upon the last, even when the transition feels abrupt. There is also freedom in understanding that closure does not come from recreating what ended, but from discerning why it existed in the first place. When you grasp the assignment, resentment loosens its grip. Gratitude replaces confusion, and peace settles where questions once lingered. Letting go becomes an act of respect rather than rejection. You are not erasing the past, you are placing it in its proper context, so it no longer defines your future. Love that is meant to last evolves, love that is meant to teach concludes. Both are valuable, and neither should be shamed. God does not measure significance by duration, but by transformation. Some connections ignite growth quickly, and then step aside so expansion can continue unhindered. Others remain to steward what has matured. Discernment allows you to distinguish between the two without bitterness. Trying to preserve a season beyond its lifespan often fractures what was meant to bless you. Old structures cannot always contain new growth, and God does not pour fresh purpose into vessels that can no longer hold it. Jesus illustrated this principle clearly in Luke 5 verse 37, reminding that new wine requires new wineskins. When you attempt to force continuity where God has initiated change, the result is strain rather than stability. With deeper understanding, shame quiets. You stop measuring your worth by who stayed or left and begin honoring how each person shaped your growth. The ending no longer defines you, the fruit does. Peace comes when you accept that not everyone is meant to remain, yet no one enters your life without purpose. That peace comes from recognizing what truly changed. They didn't change you, outgrew the contract, and growth quietly rewrote the terms you never signed aloud. What once felt mutual began to feel narrow, not because anyone became wrong, but because development expanded your capacity. Spiritual growth does not ask permission before it rearranges compatibility. It simply advances, and relationships either adjust or dissolve. When transformation takes root, the agreement that once balanced the connection expires without drama, leaving clarity where confusion used to live. Momentum shifts when values evolve because shared direction matters more than shared history. You start noticing that conversations strain expectations, press tighter, and compromise feels heavier than before. This does not mean love failed, it means alignment changed. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 17. Newness carries weight, and older dynamics often cannot support it without cracking. Some relationships depend on an earlier version of you to remain stable. When you grow, the balance shifts, exposing reliance on habits you have already outlived. You are not obligated to shrink so others can remain comfortable. Expansion is not arrogance. It is obedience to the work God is doing within you. Maturity brings awareness, and awareness reveals when expectations were built around who you used to be rather than who you are becoming. Clarity continues to surface when you recognize how restriction often disguises itself as loyalty. Old expectations begin to feel confining because they no longer fit the measure of your calling. This realization does not require confrontation or accusation. Growth exposes misalignment simply by existing. The contrast becomes evident without raised voices or dramatic exits, and peace replaces the need to defend your evolution. Resistance frequently emerges from those who sense growth, highlighting what they avoided becoming. Change can unsettle people who benefited from your former limits, yet their discomfort does not define your responsibility. He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. Proverbs 13, verse 20. Wisdom chooses environments that nourish development, even when that choice feels costly at first. Freedom follows when you accept that changing is not betrayal. You are not abandoning people. You are answering the call to mature. God never designed growth to be negotiated down to preserve familiarity. Purpose requires room to breathe, and suppression suffocates what heaven intends to expand. When you honor development, you honor the future God prepared long before these relationships formed. There is also grief in outgrowing agreements because memories still matter, even when compatibility fades. Allow that grief its place without letting it steer your decisions. You can respect the past while releasing its control. Growth does not erase gratitude, it reframes it. You carry forward what strengthened you and leave behind what can no longer keep pace. Progress demands movement, and movement sometimes disrupts what once felt settled. Ye did run well. Who did hinder you that ye should not obey the truth? Galatians 5, verse 7. Obedience to growth restores momentum where stagnation tried to slow you down. Expansion is not disloyalty, it is alignment. When you choose to keep becoming, you make space for relationships that can meet you where God is taking you next. Growth keeps unfolding whether others approve or resist, and your task is to remain faithful to the direction revealed through peace. Courage strengthens when you refuse to retreat into form.